Welcome back to the Stay Spicy podcast. This season, we've been having some great discussions about leadership. We've had some great guests, and it certainly has been spicy, but it can always be spicier, right? So we decided to have a little bit of a debate on today's episode. And since Sherry's playing the role of a guest today, I'm going to take over her job just for today as chief statistician for the Stay Spicy podcast.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Sherry loves her stats. Okay, so to set the stage a little bit, set the scene for this topic for today, and this episode's title is What's My Age Again? And you'll find out why in just a second. According to new analysis of census data, as of September 2023, so over a year ago, millennials aged 27 to 42 make up most of the full-time workforce. Yay, us. Followed by Gen X, which is ages 44 to 59. And then baby boomers, ages 60 to 78. And lastly, Gen Z, age 11 to 26. And Gen Z is expected to overtake baby boomers in the workforce by basically this year and overtake millennials by 2040.
Wow.
So we have an unprecedented mix of generations in the workforce, and they aren't always seeing eye to eye. When it comes to pop culture, we know Gen Z takes issues with some of our fashion choices. They're telling us millennials we can't side part our hair, wear skinny jeans. I'm obviously not paying attention to any of that. And us millennials and Gen X, I think, are constantly baffled by the lexicon of random slang words that they come up with. But beyond pop culture and fashion and slang, in the workforce, they don't always see eye to eye either on styles and approaches and needs. So that is exactly what we're going to talk about today. We're calling this, we don't have someone from each generation. We also don't have enough chairs in our studio, but but we do have somebody representing 3 different decades. So we're going to call this Battle of the Decades. And in the left corner, I guess our left, representing the 50s, we have Anjum. In the right corner, representing the 30s, we have Chenille. And in the middle, we have, representing the 40s, our very own Sherry.
Ding, ding, ding.
Let's get ready to rumble.
All right.
Okay, we're going to start with some intros. So beforehand, each of you sent me your definition of leader or leadership, and none of you have heard each other's definitions yet. So I'm going to read them out and then get you to expand on them a little bit and tell us sort of, your journey or what's informed your views on leadership. So let's start with Chenille. Chenille, you've defined a leader as someone who will push people in a direction and make them want to follow. A good leader will do this through building trust, demonstrating expertise, and taking an interest in people's growth.
Yes. So a little introduction about me. My name's Chenille, representing the millennials, one of the representatives of the millennials here.
The younger millennials.
I'm currently the HR coordinator for Armor Insurance Group, and my definition of a leader sort of came from a little bit of background on me. So even though I'm a younger millennial, I consider myself sort of an older student. I went to school twice for 2 different degrees. And so I did actually enjoy my second degree with a bunch of Gen Z. So that was interesting.
So you're also bringing the Gen Z perspective a bit today.
I'm a little bit of the Gen Z perspective. Yep. I've seen a lot of different leaderships across a lot of different industries and a lot of different types of leadership and a lot of different techniques I've seen for leadership. And sort of my definition came from what resonated with me. Leaders who sort of took an interest in what did you want to do? Or, through their expertise, they were able to tell me, well, if this is what you want to do, this might be the direction to take. A combination of that got me interested in the work that they themselves were doing. So they sort of compelled me to sort of go along with the vision that they were taking. Yeah.
Let's go to Sherry next. So Sherry says that a good leader, she's prefaced it by saying a good leader, not just a leader, is honest. They're honest with their team and they're honest with themselves. They bring their experience to tough situations and they know life is bigger than work. Interesting. They share their knowledge and advice to grow their team and are okay putting themselves out of business, promoting others. They do not default to positional authority. This is big for Sherry, when it's the most convenient path. Sometimes the best leaders don't realize they are leading. They're just doing what they think is right.
Yeah, so I have had, I think, the benefit and the experience of growing up with many generations in the workforce. So I often find millennials are kind of stuck in between the different generations and learning about the different styles. I've had great boomer colleagues. I've had great Gen X colleagues. I've had great Gen Z. I'm learning so much from them. So my leadership experience started in the public sector. I'm the co-host of the podcast. I'm co-host of the podcast. So, professional storyteller. I've worked in communications for years. And I really believe that leadership is about being able to be honest and transparent and show your emotions at work. We don't talk a lot about feelings and the creativity that could come from that. And when we have creativity, we have ideas. So I believe that we should create space for leaders to be honest, for everyone to have a bad day. And I think that ultimately we need to get away from the idea that the highest paid person's opinion matters. I think we need to embrace the fact that ideas are king, and we need to open up and let that honesty shine through. So that is my dream for the workforce. I've only seen it work. And that is something I bring from the, I think, millennial perspective, is the intention of making a difference at work or in life.
You refer to yourself as a geriatric millennial.
Yeah, so I'm a bit older, so I don't speak for everyone, but yeah, I've seen. I started my job in communications when we were just answering phones for reporters, things like that, and then moving up through the use of technology, the use of the work from home revolution, and things like that. So I've just seen so much happen in the last 15 years of my career. And one of the big things I think is making work personal, and open communication and honesty have been just a big driver in the success of my career. And I think that that's definitely, again, where leaders need to go. And so I do not like positional authority. I think it's lazy. I don't appreciate it. And that, for people who don't know what that means, it's just basically whatever position you're in. If you're in a higher position, people have to listen to you. They have to. I think that these types of systems are not conducive to a good work environment and a place where we can thrive creatively.
Great. Okay, now we're going to round this out with Anjum, who's actually a younger Gen Xer. So you guys are...
And more importantly, aged well.
Yes. Yeah, she doesn't look like a Gen X. We'll get into that in a moment. She's got some stories to tell. So Anjum's definition of leadership or leader is someone who is authentic, empathetic, self-aware, embraces learning from failure, and ensures equal opportunity and equitable outcomes. They're not motivated by power and prestige. A leader wants to elevate the collective by creating a psychologically safe environment where differing opinions can be shared. They act with humility, vulnerability, and can admit when they're wrong, and as a result are adaptable to and open to change. So tell us more about that, Anjum.
Yeah, so a bit about myself. I'm an environmental engineer, so my experience has been predominantly in a very male-dominated industry that's tended to not be very welcoming. And given my age, I think I grew up in a leadership style that was very much stand command. And so my description of leadership is essentially the antithesis of what I've experienced in my career, sadly.
Aspirational.
Yes, aspirational, which is sad because it shouldn't be aspirational. More recently, I've been in the startup space, so I've been working with a lot of younger individuals and learning a lot. And in some cases, it has been challenging because I am old enough to be their mother. Sometimes I get the grandma emoji. I'm like, really? That is discriminatory.
Send you the grandma emoji?
Oh, yes. He's a great guy. I always tease him about his age. I had to actually help him unstuck his zipper.
Oh,
Sorry, what zipper?
Oh, my God. No. Jacket zipper.
Oh.
Anyhow, so...
buttoning him up. Do you have your mittens? It's cold out.
Pretty much. So it's been a real learning experience for me, and trying not to be that bitter, cynical older person in the office where it's like, well, when I was your age kind of thing. But what I appreciate about Gen Zers is they're demanding more, and good for them. And I feel we need to be listening and learning.
Agreed.
I'm watching them, like younger millennials and Gen Z and going like, yeah, good for you guys. I wish I would have had the courage to demand things or call things out when I was coming up in my career. And even, more recently, like it's just not something that we were taught was okay. And I think it's really changing the paradigm in the workplace. So, I'm going to actually jump to a topic. I was going to go to ageism, but we'll come back to that. But this kind of opens up the topic around, Junjam, you and I were talking a bit about that masking. So a lot of particularly young women have come to me and they've said that the older women leaders have been unhelpful, unkind, and sometimes just plain nasty to sort of younger women leaders or those coming up in their career. And, speculation is it's a product of sort of that system that they came up in and that they had to sort of mimic those characteristics. And then they just essentially adopted those views of that, like, I had to fight to get here. So, you're on your own. And I don't know, I want to kind of get some perspectives of, have you experienced this? Is this a gendered thing? Is it not? Is this generational? What do you think is at play there with some of this, and we value sort of that Gen Z spiritedness. But like, how do you break that cycle of trying to silence that next generation? Okay,
I can
go to you first.
I can jump in. Yeah.
Yes, I'm kind of implying you are that generation of Christy women leaders, even though I know you're not that.
I struggle with this a lot because I hear this comment, and actually before we get into this, just a lot of the data is on the binary, and we're going to be talking about gender in the binary. So just keeping in mind that there are other genders other than men and women, but today we're probably going to talk more in that regard. Honestly, I feel assholes come in all genders, and holding women, it seems to me, to a higher level and standard and expectation that, once you're a leader, then you have to elevate everyone. But we don't expect that of men necessarily. They're not criticized at the same level as women leaders if they don't do those things. So it's not to say that everyone shouldn't elevate leadership, but I do feel women are particularly criticized if they don't. To your point about masking, and I'm going to have to bring my reading glasses out.
Grandma emoji. I just print my stuff off in really big print.
I know. So there's, like I said, my background is in engineering, and I do a lot of work in the space of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And in engineering in particular, as I said, there are very few women, or what I say non-men. And this was PhD research that recently came out from Dr. Anne-Louise Howard, discussing why women, what their coping mechanisms are in these sorts of situations, so masking being one of them. And she's got quite a few examples here. I won't read all of them, but that really resonated with me. And I think, it adds to the conversation that we're having right now in terms of some of those behaviors that we see. And so she's got coping strategies mixed into two categories: adapt to the environment, which I think we're very used to, but then downplay or deny sexism. And here we express great pride in making it in a man's world and enjoy the recognition that gave them. Distance themselves from women who do not follow the unspoken rules, work hard to be seen as one of the boys. And to me, as I said, these are coping mechanisms. And that really resonated with me, as opposed to, they're jerks and they don't want to help us.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that empathetic aspect too of like seek to understand. Not to say that I think it's okay, but they have been through a really crap system and it's still crap.
Absolutely.
But we also all, and we'll talk about the system more in a future episode, we all have choices to make about who we want to be in that system and how we want to show up in the system. I had sort of that recently. I was asked to join a board, and I sort of said, well, I'm like building 2 businesses and I'm already on 4 boards, so I don't know if I can commit the time. And the board chair was a woman, and her response was like, well, a man would have like 6 businesses and 10 boards, and you should just like
because a man
like
has a full-time employee at home on the heteronormative, a wife. And so let's acknowledge that. Like, come on.
But I had the reaction of like, it was almost like a competitive reaction of like, well, fine. And then I joined the board, but I stepped off the board because the culture was not a fit for me. Should have known that. But we get that reaction instantly when somebody challenges us.
I need to prove myself.
I need to prove myself. I do need to be like them. I need to prove that.
A man. That's so terrible. That's supposed to be motivating.
Yep. So
Yeah. And I think too, people take those attitudes and biases and try to apply it to younger folks who are living in a completely different world. They're experiencing different, even the economic, pressures that young people are experiencing right now. Like when I started my career, it was like, oh, could you work overtime? Everyone's pulling their weight. Let's do it. Let's make it happen. And everyone did. I worked late sometimes, pulling the project through, doing those types of things. And people say, oh, well, Gen Z doesn't want to do that. Or, they don't want to show up. They want to leave right at 5. They don't want to do what's extra. And I'm like, well, I think that there's a very big difference between pulling something together for a team and them supplementing the job of 3 people because you won't hire someone or you can't find the right people. So they are smart enough to recognize their role in the system. They're smart enough to recognize what they're being paid for, their value, and they're going to go do that. So I do see a little bit of that animosity towards younger folks, but it's very different. So it's important, I think, for us not to take those biases or those attitudes and apply them to other generations because we just don't walk in their shoes, and they're here to teach us about. I think the workers' right movement is starting to move in a positive direction again, and I think a lot of that has to do with them.
we need to check our biases at the door.
Totally.
Well, first need to be aware of them, right? And be aware of what we have inherited and are bringing into the next generation and perpetuating in the system. Janelle, you talked about actually as an extension of what Sherry said, that a lot of younger millennials and Gen Z are kind of opting out of leadership because of what's being traditionally expected of a leadership role.
Yeah, I think so. Part of it is I think that they see these sort of behaviors, sort of like we've been talking about, these behaviors that have been perpetuated for leadership. Like you have to, go the extra mile. You have to put in these extra hours. But a mixture for millennials, but very much in the Gen Z is like, well, no, I have my work life and I have my life, and I want to live my life. Like, I think the saying we hear is like, we don't want to live to work. We want to work to live. So like, you put in your hours, but then you go and you live your life. And a lot of Gen Zs are sort of going that route. I think that's why you see them sort of standing up as like, well, no, I'm not going to put in this unpaid overtime just to get some very silent recognition from you somewhere down the road, maybe.
Just a little wink and a gun.
Yeah, a little wink and a gun, and maybe, or no, not even like a nice head nod.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just the silent recognition.
Okay, yes. Thank you for...
You are worthy.
Yeah, exactly. And then the other part, I think I'd mentioned when we had talked earlier that we sort of see that, and this is going to sound a little bit more combative, but we see a lot of baby boomer. Oh, here we go.
Where's my bell?
I think a lot of us have the impression that baby boomers are hanging on to those management positions for like dear life. Like they are clutching them. And it's like, we don't want to fight with you for those management positions. Yeah. We don't want to have to first like go the extra mile of like, getting all this expertise, getting 5 different diplomas, 3 different certificates, and then we have to sort of like tug of war on you to get the position.
Do you think that them clinging to so if we're accepting that as fact, which I think there's tacit agreement across this group, do you think that because in a previous episode, Sherry and I talked about this whole gatekeeping of like this sort of false metric of you have to be this old enough to get this position. You have to have this many credentials and all of this. It's more of a function of them gatekeeping. What's the thought kind of among this group? Because we think that some of those sort of false metrics are just bullshit.
Well, for me, it's this forever young false narrative about anyone who's trying to get into management or somebody who's trying to get into a leadership position. I think as a millennial, like I've been in meetings where they talked about millennials like I wasn't there and that they were 10 years younger than me and still living in their parents' basement. Like I think there's this
Are you living in your parents' basement,
No.
Sherry? I've been to your house. You own your own house.
I live in my own basement. But you know, it's sort of you're always young.
Yeah.
And like you'll be 40 and you'll be trying to get into management. You have all the experience and it's just sort of like you're not there yet. It's like I want to retire in like 15 years.
Okay, this is a really
So the
good
forever
segue.
young thing, I think, is the perception that we don't age. People still talk about millennials like they're 25.
Yes.
This is true.
Yes.
Right? So
I've frozen you in time.
yeah,
It's
you've been frozen.
Well, thank you. This HD lighting does not freeze me in time. Sharon and I were talking about that. We're like, we love the studio, but our 40 plus faces don't love the studio. So, Anjum, you have a forever young story.
I have two, actually, when I was thinking about this. So a few years ago, I was co-chairing a conference and we were trying to get sponsorship. And my friend who's the co-chair, she's a professor at the Faculty of Engineering at a university in Alberta, I will say. And so we were talking to the dean and wanting to get money. And she introduced me and said, at the time I was the director of engineering services at the city of Edmonton. And he immediately responded with, wow, you're so young and successful. You haven't faced any discrimination. And I was like, wow, like in one sentence, you've mansplained my whole lived experience. That's fabulous.
My gender, race, and age.
And my friend, we were both so taken aback. And then she's trying to now make me present what my age actually is, and was like, well, Anjum actually has 20 years of experience. It was just terrible because of my youthful appearance. It has unfortunately been detrimental. I mean, I'm not an Instagram influencer. Like, I'm not selling youth. I'm an engineer.
Right.
And then somewhat recently, I had an experience where I was told I was the future. And I thought, well, I'm 50. Like, when is that? When I'm dead? Like, what is the future exactly? And I think it was thinly veiled ageism. This was supposed to be a compliment. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Right.
Like, I'm 50 years old. So now I feel I have to assert that, like say, oh yeah, no, I'm celebrating my milestone birthday. It's 50.
Yeah.
Like you have to, basically the implication of you're the future is wait your turn.
Exactly.
You're like, when is my turn?
Exactly.
Right.
If not now, then when?
Yeah.
That's it.
We're running companies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People in their
Like,
30s are running companies.
And
Like,
I'm in an executive role. I have been for some time. And,
Right.
And to the point about, years of experience, I always say this is not how many years you've been breathing on this earth, because many of us have worked with people that have just been breathing. They have done nothing with those years.
Yes.
And you work with some people with limited experience, but wow, like amazing ability, potential, whatever you want to say.
Yes.
So really, just in terms of job descriptions or job postings, remove all of that. Focus on competencies. And you can gain those in 2 years or in some people 20 years. And I would say the person who took 20 years is someone we don't want.
Yeah.
Right.
They're slow learner.
Exactly.
Maybe they need some help. I similarly, I got into executive positions relatively young, but I also looked younger than I was and was super insecure about that because it got commented on all the time. So I'd always find ways to sort of work my age into conversation, and I felt icky. But but I always felt like I had to say, it's okay. I'm not a child. Like,
Right.
it's sad that we've equated age with competence. And that's the ageism sort of issue that we have. I want to also just throw out if there are other intersections with ageism, and like we talked about gender and race, and there are multiple other, I don't know if you guys want to throw out any other thoughts or examples in there.
Well, I would say definitely on the gender side of things, because society wants youth in women. Women are particularly susceptible to that.
And we're punished for it.
What's that?
Then we're punished for it.
Exactly. Yeah. And so there was a recent article in HBR about this, that basically at any age for women, you're discriminated against. When you're young, she's too young, she's too inexperienced, she's too pretty. Then your childbearing age. Oh, well, we don't want to invest in her because she might have a kid and then we're going to lose her. And then all of a sudden you're just damaged goods going into menopause, and we don't want to have that around the office.
Right.
And so, I mean,
she might take her shirt off if she has a hot flash.
Yeah. Well, it's well known in marketing. Once you hit the 50s, it's like
you're done.
You're behind the scenes.
So we're screwed at any age, basically.
Basically.
Pretty much. Yeah.
Janelle, I mean, you probably have a unique experience too, because you said like you went back to school. So you are on the younger side, but coming in as a student, people probably think you're even younger.
Yeah, no, I think, and actually it's really fun because you're all talking about how looking youthful sort of sometimes works against you. But for me, I was very actually self-conscious when we worked together. I was very self-conscious about my age because, it had been a student role, but I was in my late 20s at that time. Mm-hmm. Yes, I'm no longer in my late 20s, just so we're clear.
You froze in time for me too, though.
Exactly.
I was like, you're Gen Z, right?
Yeah, I'm like, oh, thank you. Bless. And it's funny, actually, because I did go to school with a lot of Gen Zs, and they actually thought I was like one of them. They were always surprised when I would make these like weird slangs. And I'd be like, well, no, that's what I used to say. Apparently I don't anymore. Do
they tell you to stop wearing skinny jeans too? You're like, never.
I think time told me to stop wearing skinny jeans. So that ship sailed. So I did have a very unique experience because I was actually very self-conscious about that I was like too old. I was like, oh no, I should have done so much more by the time I was in my late 20s. Like, I should have been, in like on my way to a management role, but here I am sort of like starting from the ground up as like an intern. I was really self-conscious about it, but I saw through my experience, actually, since then, I've seen a variety of ages. I've seen people who are, in their 50s who are, doing what, you wouldn't expect of like a management role, but they have like all this experience and they're happy with their role. They like their role. I'm like, oh, that's really what you want at the end of the day. You just want to be happy with where you are. Maybe you need to work a little longer to get there, or maybe you got lucky and in 2 years you're there. Mm-hmm. And both are fine.
Yeah, I think certainly some people, it does take them longer to figure out what they want. We've spoken before about, at least from a female perspective, when a lot of us hit 40 is finally when we go, oh, this is who I am and this is what I want, and start to get towards being able to speak up for it. And so I think that's why you're seeing a lot of later career people make changes, because they have that wake up call. And I guess my hope, and it's going to be interesting to see if Gen Z actually doesn't have to go through that, because they're already there and asserting who they are and what they want. But I guess time will tell. So I'm going to throw a stat out at you guys. Seems like you all really identify with the millennial perspective, but and we talked a little bit about this, but 63% of millennials believe they aren't being fully developed as leaders by their employers for management positions. So that notion of actively being developed, not just that they're not wanting to take them, that's more Gen Z. So millennials want to be in leadership positions, but they don't feel like they're being actively developed. And then 71% of the workforce do not trust their leaders' capability to take their organization to the next level, which is really interesting. So I'm curious what you all think about that, about this concept of, of this responsibility to develop future leaders, and then also that lack of trust that seems to exist in the current leadership crop. Maybe we'll start with our geriatric millennial.
Well, when I talked in the beginning and gave you my sort of, I guess, summary of what I consider a leader, and I said, good leaders put themselves out of business. And what I meant by that is that they are committed to succession planning. They're committed to them moving up and doing what they want to do, and also making sure that they are professional mentors and coaches, and they are doing everything they can to develop their team and see them fly, right? As opposed to keeping people in the same places or giving them the same duties. And I think there is a generational difference. Like, I know, I love my mother-in-law, but she said, to my husband, go somewhere and get a job for 20 years, just go put in your resume and get a job and stay there for 20 years. And that's just not the case right now. Like, if you want to make money, you have to switch jobs or positions, even within the same company, every few years. And that is statistically proven, and you will make more money if you do that. I believe in sort of organizational movement. I believe that's healthy for organizations. It's like just giving an organization some exercise. But I do know that there are some folks who want to sit in the same role for 20 years. If you want to do that, that's fine. But I don't want those people to be in leadership positions, because I think you have to continue contributing to the movement and the promotion of the younger generations. So that's my take on that.
And Jim, Chanel, what do you think about this notion of sort of that responsibility to foster the next generation of leaders?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I have a bit of a differing opinion in that, I see a lot of movement. So then it's like, well, why do I invest in you? Because you're going to just leave in 2 years and 3 years. And while I do agree, and I think that's a problem with the system, that you tend to get bigger promotions, more money when you leave, why are we not compensating loyalty? And so, like I said, for me, it's like, well, how much am I going to invest in you when I know you're going to leave in 2 or 3 years?
And then, you've been there and you see someone else be brought in at a promotion.
Very demotivating.
Yeah. Why wasn't I considered?
Exactly.
And it could be that person's not ready, but why wouldn't you give them a path to readiness and have that conversation rather than just be like, keep doing what you're doing?
Like, the majority of the staff that I have worked with that are in that Gen Z, they're like, I'm going to stick it out for a couple of years and see what happens. Like, there is, so then that sends a signal to me, right? Okay, well, how much?
You.
How much am I going to invest here? And when dollars are limited for professional development and those sorts of things. But that's the reality. I mean, so we have to balance that.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I take a very quintessentially millennial perspective to leadership, because when I was leading teams, I would have conversations with them about their professional development and say, let's talk about developing you as a professional, not just for this job, but let's make you the best professional you can be, whether it's for here or somewhere else. And I just expected, I guess, that if we didn't have a position for them when they were ready to grow, that I accepted that they would go elsewhere.
Oh, absolutely.
But on the flip side, to your point, I also created positions and was creative about how I added more growth responsibilities to people to keep good people. And I think that certainly is lacking, right? It's just we get stuck in this, okay, well, this is the next step. If you're not ready for that, then you're still here. But we don't get creative about how we...
Growth opportunities, for sure. It's not necessarily a positional promotion. I totally agree.
Yeah, or create a half step or whatnot. So, I mean, Chanel, from an HR perspective, we're talking about like creating positions and growth opportunities. What do you think? Like, if you could design the perfect system to help people grow within a company, what would you do?
I actually agree with a lot of what you said, like creating those like half steps. Especially since I've worked at 3 different student positions, I've seen how like amazing it is to have like a student, and I've seen, students return to the job that they interned at, and then they have like all this knowledge of the systems. They have all these great ideas to improve things, and then you get that loyalty that you're looking for. And to your point, though, you are right that like, there is a good chance that even like a couple years, maybe 5 years max down the road, they will sort of, go to a company just for their growth. But then, and I always tell my current manager this, that my sort of point of view on life is all cupcakes and rainbows because I'm thinking that, yeah, she laughs at it too.
Cupcakes.
Exactly. Is that you'll have that sort of bond there. Like maybe they'll go to another company in your industry and you'll have that sort of connection there of like, if you need another point of view or another set of eyes, you'll always have that.
Oh yeah, like I'm not saying, just dismiss it, you're dead to me because I know you're going to be leaving
Come
in
on,
2 years.
Jim. We know.
Well, maybe my inside voice.
I block you on LinkedIn. We're done.
Never speak to me again. Do not even nod to me in the street.
Cross the street when you see me.
But it's something I struggle with personally, right? The balance of knowing that you are likely going to leave. And so caring for you as an individual and wanting to see you grow, knowing that you're going to take those skills somewhere else.
It's an interesting approach, though, to come into a company and be like, yeah, I'll give this a try for a year or two.
That is
It's kind of like coming into a relationship and being like, let's take this day by day.
That's a very
Kind
Gen
of.
Z
Keeping my
thing.
options open.
Yes, this.
But I think that is that generation. Like that is
absolutely,
sort of,
and that's the conflict that's in the workplace, and we just have to, like I said, adapt and grow, and maybe it's just time to retire.
I don't know. Apparently, you're still the future. I don't think you can retire yet.
I feel that's when I'm dead, though, Chanel.
yes, postmortem
Postmortem.
leadership. We'll have that as an episode.
Halloween.
It's interesting though, thinking about this longevity piece, because I have struggled with it when having conversations about CEO roles. And it doesn't seem to be as much of a barrier maybe to like C-suite roles, but to that CEO role, they really want a commitment for what a millennial considers a long period of time. But I just think on some level I get it, but I agree with what Sherry said about like the company needs to get exercise. You need to have, vision shifts and
Some turnover.
approach shifts. Yeah. And maybe not every 2 years from a CEO perspective, but this idea that you should be there for 10 years, I don't know, I think that causes stagnation. And if you want that next generation of leaders, we have to start thinking differently.
Mm-hmm.
So the last kind of part of that, I just want to do a little quick roundtable on that trust factor. So there's a big lack of trust in leadership. Why do you think that is? And how do you as leaders build trust?
I think I have an idea on that. I think it's because, and this probably is more prevalent with Gen Z but it's sort of like in millennials as well as that, we see leadership and like, oh, you've been there for like 10, 15, 20 years. Like what new ideas are you bringing to like move us forward? Or do you want to just keep us in like this, be it a steady spot or this like single spot for like the rest of eternity? But I think some millennials and many Gen Z, they think like, oh no, I want to like grow. I want to move up. And they don't see that coming from leadership. They see leadership as like, oh no, we want to like stay here, this perfect little spot that we picked up. Mm-hmm. This is where we want to live. And I think that might be some of the distress with leadership.
So do you build trust by just getting the fuck out?
I would say you build that trust by showing that you're willing to change. You're willing to have some flexibility, like
openness to new perspectives.
Like the CEO of my current place, I think just this year, we changed our core focus, which was like, I was like so shocked by that. I'm like, he's run this place for I think 35 years. He's like, no, I think we're ready to change focus. He's shown this like openness to like change, to new ideas. And like, that's like, so that built some trust for me. It's like, oh, okay. Like I can see that you're a person that's willing to say, oh, this isn't working. We need to try and shift gears. We need to get maybe new ideas in here. And so that's very reassuring for me.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, I think too much change is a red flag in a leader, where that's like every other week there's a reorg or a new thing. And that just, I think there is a prevalence of that with some leaders who quite frankly just don't know what they're doing. And that could be a source of that mistrust as well. Mm-hmm. Sherry, have you experienced that?
Yeah, I see that a lot in my work, but I think that's a little bit more ego driven than anything else. People who want to make their mark at the risk of the comfort and the safety of the group. But for me, it always comes back down to that transparency and honesty. But that also means, as a leader, being honest about whether that's acceptable or not, your faults, what you don't know, and when you need help. So I've always felt that that's the best policy. So I think that flies in the face of a lot of the stoic kind of leadership stuff we've been taught for years. But I think that builds better relationships. And that is, to me, the key.
What about you, Anjum, on the topic of trust?
Yeah, I think I described it in my leadership definition, and you've both touched upon it. It's such a low bar. Just be honest and do what you're going to say and listen and be willing to admit mistakes and change course. And that, I think, really builds trust. People are like, oh, okay, wow, she actually listened, or she's clear about what her expectations are when she's asking for feedback and what she is going to take or what she's not going to take. That, I think, is really what builds the team, right? Knowing where you stand.
Yeah.
The transparency, and be consistent. When you talked about like constantly changing, it's that chaos, right? That does not breed trust whatsoever. That
Breeds fear.
if fear, you don't know what's going on, instability, and we've all been in those situations, right? And it's
Unfortunately,
extremely stressful.
Multiple times, I think, for many
It's
of us.
extremely stressful.
Okay, well, I'm going to call it now. Thank you for participating in our Battle of the Decades. You guys did great. You didn't fight too much.
I know, it wasn't
I was
much
really
of a
disappointing.
battle.
You agreed.
No, we agree on a lot
far
of
too
things,
much.
actually.
We're gonna have to maybe we'll have to get a boomer and a Gen Z in
I
for
think-
next time,
I think that
because
was it.
we picked on boomers quite a bit.
Pick on boomers and Gen Z, to be fair. I think us millennials were like, no, everyone, let's be friends.
Yeah, we're a
Let's
little
drink
too
tea."
harmony
Everybody gets a
focused.
certificate.
That's not millennials. Okay, now we're gonna fight.
Okay, yeah, all right. Throw down.
Hey, I did not get participation ribbons. I would like to say.
Same here. I think I got like 1 third place trophy in baseball as like pity, and I treasured that thing.
I want a
Who's taught second
certificate.
place is first loser.
Ouch.
That's harsh.
On that note, thank you all for joining today. This was, though not controversial as we thought, a really, I think, fantastic discussion on leadership. Some really great topics were brought up. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in. A lot of the topics that we talked about, we're going to go into more depth as the season goes on. So make sure you tune in to those. And then, of course, in the meantime, maybe we'll get it all together.
Stay
Stay
spicy.
spicy.
Thanks for listening to the Stay Spicy podcast.
We love hearing from our listeners and want you to be part of our community. So connect with us on social media at Stay Spicy Inc.
And visit us online at stayspicy.ca.